All right, so this is that lower fairing now screwed into place. Like I said, it's just held on with 4 screws around the perimeter. Of course, the nut plates are attached to the inside of the actual wheel pant halves. And the fit between the fairing and the wheel pant is excellent. I can't get a fingernail underneath here around the whole perimeter. So that fit is really nice. The fit around the gear leg itself is a lot more loose, which is kind of what I wanted. I think it's a little too tight in this area here. There is a little bit of a gap in the very leading edge, but around here and around here I think is a little tight. It's not overly tight. It fits really well, but I was wanting it a little bit. I wanted a little bit of a gap around the whole thing. And then the gap, here's the rest of it. You can see, I think I'm going to leave this just like it is. I kind of like it nice and long like that. We'll see. The gap in the back is a lot more just because, like I said, I didn't want to pinch it down too tight. So the trailing edge pieces lay together really nice. And I had cut these down, not cut them down, but after I had the fairing in place and I had these halves together, this bottom one stood out past this top piece. It stuck out in this direction. So I just used a marker and traced it, and then I trimmed that down. So now these edges are in line with each other. But you can see the gap here. This gap here, and there's a gap in here a little bit. You can maybe see that if I push on it. Like I said, I just did not want to pinch this down tight. But I'm going to leave it like that, and you can see this is what I was talking about a little bit before. The nut plate is obviously riveted, so it's basically flat. But since the bolt is going through a curved area, the head sticks up a little bit. And then, of course, you've got the body of the nut plate in between these two halves. So this is only going to pinch down so much, and then it ends up hitting the nut plate. And then the screw, I cut the screw down, but I didn't cut it enough. I'm going to have to file this screw down a little bit more, make it shorter so it's more flush with this surface and it doesn't stick out as much. So, will it work? Yeah, initially. For how long? I don't know, but this is what I'm going to go with. I'm going to duplicate this on the other side. I'm going to get started on that now. And the first thing that I did was I took this fairing and I took the other fairing and I put them together. And then I just marked these hole locations, the 4 perimeter holes. I just marked them onto the other fairing for symmetry. Because I know that when I did this one, those 4 holes don't interfere. They don't even come close to anything that's on the wheel pant. There's nothing inside the wheel pant that those 4 screws even come close to. So for symmetry between the 2 sides, I just located those hole locations onto the other piece, and you can see that here. These locations here were just brought over from the other pant, roughly. This one is shaped slightly different than the other one, so they're not exactly perfect, but I just put them basically back to back and transferred the hole locations, and I came back my 3/8 of an inch from those marks to get my edge distance. I'm going to start fitting this to the other side. So I'll get started on that, and I'll talk to you guys later. Howdy, everyone. Obviously, I've got the aircraft now back on the ground, but that does not mean that I'm finished with the gear leg fairings. The bottom fairings are now done. My original plan for those fairings did not work out, so I have a little bit of extra work I need to do. So I had originally had a nut plate in here. This back side here had a nut plate, but it was on the inside, and this countersunk screw screwed into that nut plate with the idea of the bottom part being relatively flush with no nut or anything like that. And it worked okay for this side. I was able to get this seam closed. But on the other fairing, it is shaped slightly different. And I did the same thing on it. And once I got the nut plate on and I put the screw in, there was a big gap, probably close to 1/8. So I decided to abandon that nut plate deal. But since I've decided not to do the nut plate, now I have a nut, and you can see the 2 holes on either side of the nut that now are going to have to be dealt with. I think what I'll probably do is fill that with fuel tank sealant. I want something flexible. And then, of course, now I've got a nut protruding. Now the screw is going to be cut flush with the nut, but still. And I've added another screw further back, again, just to hold it together. I did not want to countersink, because at this point, if I'm going to have these nuts sticking out of the bottom, I don't think a domed head screw is going to matter too much. But at least now I don't have a countersink in here, and this will be a little bit more beefy without the countersink. So if I were to do this exact same thing a second time, I would not have countersunk this one. I would have used just through holes with 2 button head screws and nuts. These are number 6 screws. So the other side, when I was working on the nut plate stuff, I screwed up and I ended up putting the nut plate on the wrong side. I had the nut plate on the top. So I've got 2 holes here that need to be dealt with. So then I put the nut plate on the back side, on the inside, but on the lower part of the fairing. Drilled it, countersunk it, riveted on, brought it over here, put this fairing in place, and then realized that it wasn't going to close up this gap at all. So I took the nut plate off. So I've got 4 holes on this one. I've got these 2 top ones, and I've got 2 more on the bottom that have to be dealt with. And then I've got the button, of course, and both of these now have nuts underneath. So they're not ideal, but I'm okay with it. I can always change them if they irritate me later in life. But this one does not fit as nice as the one on the other side. There's more of a gap here. That one seems to pinch this corner a little bit tighter. It's not the end of the world. I want some room in here anyway. And there's more of a gap underneath the actual leg part here. This gap here is quite a bit bigger than on the other one. I tried to heat this and close this up a little bit, but I'm just going to leave it like it is for now and see what happens. So next time these come off, I'll cut this screw down even with the nut on both of them, and I'll just go with it like that. So I'm going to call these done for now, and I think I will move on to other things. So what had happened was I'm not going to do the top fairings because when these were shipped to me, I got 2 of the same side. So I got 2 left top fairings instead of a left and a right. So the company realized their mistake, and they are going to send me the appropriate left and right fairings for the top. While I wait on those, that's going to take a few weeks. While I wait, I decided to go ahead and put the airplane back on the ground, and I'm going to go back to engine work. So the engine work had originally stopped, and I moved on to the gear leg fairings and wheel pant fairings and all that because I was waiting on the exhaust. I realized I couldn't do all my plumbing and wiring and all that without the exhaust in place. So while I was waiting on the exhaust, I went to Fairings. Now that I'm waiting on these top fairing replacements, that's going to take a few weeks. I'm going to go back to working on the engine. So the exhaust is in hand. I'm going to start with it and then try to get my head around what I need to do next. You also notice I got new valve covers. The original valve covers that came with the engine back in 2012 were just the steel, pressed steel type of Titan. I think they were ECI covers that were black. I've since replaced those with these machined aluminum ones. These are a lot nicer, and I like the aluminum color better than the black. So I'm going to get cranking on the exhaust, and I will talk to you guys later.